He was left out his whole life, until one stranger changed everything. He was the kind of kid who didn't get noticed until it was time to count heads on a field trip. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. Ben always knew he was different, but not in a way that people celebrated. He wasn't the kid with the cool shoes or the loud laugh that made the whole class join in. He wasn't the fastest runner, or the best reader, or the one with a crazy talent that made teachers stop and watch. He was just there. In kindergarten, it started small. The other kids made fast friendships, the kind where they'd hold hands and race to the swings together. Ben would walk behind them, never quite sure if he was part of the group or just near it. His teacher once told his mom during a conference, "He's so sweet, but he seems to drift on the edges." That word stuck with her, and with Ben too, even if he didn't know what it meant at the time. By second grade, the birthday parties started. Balloons and cake and invitations handed out in little envelopes. Ben would watch his classmates light up when their name was called. He'd sit very still, waiting. But his envelope never came. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't. He'd go home and pretend it didn't matter. It did. In gym class, teams were picked fast. Everyone knew who they wanted. Kids pointed, called out names, grinned. Ben would smile too, trying to look casual as the numbers thinned out and his name still hadn't been called. Eventually someone would shrug and say, "We'll take Ben," like he was a leftover slice of pizza. Cold, but still food. He didn't complain. He didn't cry. He just got used to it. By the time middle school came around, Ben had learned to keep his expectations low. He brought a book to lunch every day. Not because he loved reading that much, but because it gave him a reason not to talk to anyone. It was easier to look busy than to look lonely. He'd sit at the end of a table, never too close, never right in the middle. He always picked a spot where no one would have to ask him to move. Sometimes a teacher would notice. They'd crouch down next to him and ask, "How are you doing, Ben?" And he'd smile, because he was good at smiling, and say, "I'm okay." It was easier than explaining that he felt like a ghost wearing a hoodie. His parents tried, in their own way. They were kind people, but tired ones. His dad worked double shifts, and his mom took care of her elderly parents. Dinner was quiet. Everyone was exhausted. He didn't want to be another weight on their shoulders, so he kept his thoughts to himself. He played video games alone. He watched movies alone. He did homework at the kitchen table while the house creaked quietly around him. He didn't hate his life. He just didn't know what it would feel like to be chosen first, or even second. In group projects, he did all the work because no one really talked to him. When people needed help, they'd ask, because Ben was smart and quiet and wouldn't make a big deal. But they never asked twice. They never asked if he wanted to hang out after school. He told himself it didn't bother him. Sometimes it did. It's a strange thing, growing up always feeling like the extra piece that didn't fit into the puzzle. You learn to adapt. You learn to fade a little, to make your presence smaller so it's easier for everyone else. And the older he got, the better he got at it. But even Ben, with all the ways he had taught himself to shrink, still hoped. Somewhere deep down, there was this quiet little hope that maybe one day someone would see him, not just as a body in a chair or a name on a roll call, but really see him. He didn't know it yet, but that day was coming. By the time Ben reached 6th grade, he had already figured out the rules. Don't speak unless someone speaks to you first. Don't ask to sit with anyone. Just find a quiet spot where no one will ask you to move. Don't expect anyone to remember your birthday. It wasn't bitterness. He wasn't angry at anyone. But silence had become his shield. At first it wasn't like that. When he was little, he used to try. He'd walk up to kids on the playground and ask if he could join their game. Most of the time, they'd say they already had even teams, or they were about to stop playing, or they'd just run away laughing without answering at all. Ben didn't cry in front of them. He'd just sit on the swing and tell himself they were busy. Maybe tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow rarely was. By middle school, he wasn't swinging anymore. He was just trying to get through the day unnoticed. It was in 6th grade that he started eating lunch in the hallway sometimes. He found a quiet spot near the art room, out of the way, but close enough that he wouldn't get in trouble for hiding. It wasn't that he didn't like people. He just didn't know how to be around them anymore. In class, he was the kind of student every teacher liked. He did his work, turned things in on time, never disrupted anything. But he wasn't the one they remembered after the year ended. He didn't make a mark. He just passed through. There were moments, little flashes, where he thought maybe he was wrong. Like when a girl named Marcy said she liked his drawing once during art class. Or when a kid in science asked to borrow a pencil and said, "Thanks, dude," like it meant something. But nothing ever lasted. No one ever came back the next day and said, "Hey, Ben, want to sit with us?" So he stopped waiting for it. At home, it was more of the same. His parents asked how school was, and he always said, "Fine." They were nice. They really were. They just had their own things going on. Work stress, bills, chores. His little sister needed help with everything. Ben learned to take care of himself. He'd make his own lunch, do his homework without being told. If something hurt, he'd keep it to himself. He started journaling. Nothing dramatic, just a few sentences each night before bed. Sometimes he'd write about what happened at school. Other times, he'd make up conversations he wished had happened. He'd imagine someone saying, "Hey, I noticed you were sitting alone. Want to join us?" Or, "You're actually really funny, you know that?" Writing it down made it feel almost real. That journal became his safe place. In there, he wasn't invisible. In there, someone cared. But the longer things stayed the same, the less he believed those things would ever happen outside of his notebook. By the end of 7th grade, he'd gotten so good at keeping quiet that most people didn't even realize he was in the room until roll call. Sometimes teachers would pair students for activities, and Ben would watch the reactions. The subtle sighs, the shift in body language. He didn't blame them. He knew he wasn't the fun one, or the one with the wild stories. He was just Ben, the quiet kid with the messy backpack and the always too small t-shirts. That summer, when his parents asked if he wanted to sign up for any camps or activities, he said no. He said he wanted a break. They didn't push it. But really, he just didn't want to go through another set of introductions, another round of being politely tolerated, then forgotten. He spent that summer mostly indoors, reading and playing games alone. The days blurred together, and he didn't mind. He was used to things feeling the same. He didn't expect anything to change. He wasn't even looking for it. But that was the thing about Ben's story. Change didn't wait for him to be ready. By the time Ben started high school, he had mastered the art of being unnoticed. The first day felt just like every other first day had before. Crowded halls, buzzing voices, people reuniting and laughing like they hadn't just seen each other a few weeks ago. Ben walked through it all like a shadow. No one said his name. No one asked where he'd been, and he didn't expect them to. He knew the drill. Get to class, sit near the back, keep your head down, listen, nod, do the work. Don't raise your hand unless absolutely necessary. Avoid eye contact unless someone talks to you directly. Freshman year wasn't painful. It was just empty. People weren't cruel to him. They just didn't think about him. That kind of quiet isolation was almost worse. There were no rumors, no teasing, no bullying, just silence. Total, everyday silence. In the cafeteria, he found a corner table by the window. He liked the view because it gave him something to look at while he ate. He'd bring a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a water bottle. Nothing messy, nothing that drew attention. He ate slow, watching people laugh and scroll on their phones, watching friends trade fries and complain about classes. Sometimes he wondered what it would feel like to sit in the middle of that noise and be part of it, just once. But then the bell would ring, and he'd put his trash in the bin and leave like he was never there. In class, teachers liked him because he was reliable. He didn't talk over others, didn't act out, and always turned things in on time. But they didn't really know him, not in the way they knew other kids, the ones with big personalities or funny stories or strong opinions. Ben was just steady, just present. There were moments, here and there, when he thought someone might be reaching out. A guy in history class who offered him a high five after they both aced a test. A girl in English who complimented his short story. A kid in math who asked if he wanted to be partners on a project. But it never stuck. The moment would pass, and so would they. It felt like trying to catch rain with a paper cup. A little hope would drip in, but it always soaked through and disappeared. Sophomore year came and went the same way. He started walking a little faster between classes, not because he was in a hurry, but because it helped him feel less exposed. If he moved quickly, maybe no one would notice he was always alone. At home, his parents started asking fewer questions, not because they didn't care, but because the answers were always the same. How was school? Fine. Anything happened today? Not really. He knew they were tired. His mom had taken on extra hours, and his dad had started commuting farther for work. His little sister needed help with homework and rides to practice. Ben didn't want to add more to their plates, so he stayed quiet. He'd eat dinner with them, smile politely, then go back to his room. He started drawing more that year. Not for school, just for himself. He'd sketch people in hallways, invent little cartoon characters, create scenes he wished were real. Sometimes he'd imagine himself in them. Just a guy sitting at a table with friends, laughing, just existing out loud. But the drawings stayed in his notebook, just like the words he never said. Junior year started, and it felt like nothing had changed. His locker was still tucked in a hallway no one used. His classes were full of faces that looked past him. Even his teachers sometimes forgot to take attendance until the end of class, and then they'd glance up and say, "Oh, Ben, right, got it." That moment always stung more than he let on. He told himself he didn't care, that it didn't matter, that it was better this way. But sometimes, when he looked around at how everyone else moved through the world, confident, loud, noticed, he wondered what it was like to just belong. To walk into a room and know someone was glad you were there. He hadn't felt that in a long time, and he had no idea how close he was to finding it. Something inside Ben started to give way that year, like a thread quietly snapping. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a single moment where everything fell apart. It was just small things piling up, a slow unraveling. Like his silence wasn't protecting him anymore. It was starting to suffocate him. He was 17 and tired in a way he couldn't explain. Not physically, emotionally, mentally. Like he'd been carrying the weight of being alone for so long, his arms had just started to go numb. The start of senior year should have felt like a finish line. For most kids, it was the year of everything. Football games, late-night food runs, inside jokes, countdowns, prom. But for Ben, it was just another 12 months of keeping his head down and counting the days. Something shifted in October. He started skipping lunch, not because he wasn't hungry, but because he couldn't take the noise. The cafeteria felt louder that year. More laughter, more movement. It made his chest feel tight in a way that scared him. So he found the library. It was quiet there. The lights were soft. The shelves didn't judge him. He picked a table in the back corner near the windows and brought a granola bar in his backpack. Some days he didn't even eat it. He just sat and stared out at the courtyard, where groups of students passed by laughing or scrolling on their phones. He wasn't bitter, just disconnected. Some teachers noticed. His English teacher asked once if everything was okay. He'd been handing in his assignments, but she said something in his writing felt different. "I'm fine," he told her. He wasn't lying exactly, but he wasn't telling the truth either. He still showed up to school on time, still passed his classes, still smiled when he needed to. But something in him had stopped reaching. Even the small part of him that used to hope someone might see him had gone quiet. It was a strange kind of sadness. Not sharp, just heavy. Like walking through water that was slowly rising and pretending it was just rain. He stopped checking his phone during breaks. There was nothing there. No messages, no notifications. Just a background screen he couldn't even remember choosing. He'd walk the halls and feel like a background extra in someone else's life. People moved around him like he was part of the scenery, just another body between them and their next class. One day he caught his reflection in the glass of a trophy case. He looked the same as always. Hoodie, faded jeans, tired eyes. But something about seeing himself like that, reflected next to a bunch of plaques with names he didn't recognize, made his chest hurt. That night he sat on the edge of his bed with the lights off and thought about how quiet everything had gotten. Not just around him, inside him too. It wasn't that he wanted to disappear. He already felt like he had. He just didn't know how to come back from it. His parents didn't know. They asked the usual questions. "Did you eat today? How was school?" And he answered the same way he always did. "Yeah." "Fine." He didn't want them to worry. They worked hard. They loved him. He knew that. But love doesn't always look like knowing how to help. And Ben didn't know how to ask for it. There were nights he'd lie awake, headphones in, listening to the same song on repeat because it made him feel something. Anything. It wasn't always sadness. Sometimes it was just numbness. Emptiness. Like he was watching his life through a window and couldn't open it. He didn't know what he was waiting for. A change? A miracle? A sign? He didn't believe in miracles. And signs didn't come for kids like him. Or so he thought. What Ben couldn't have known was that the smallest shift, the quietest moment, was coming. And it would start not with something big, but with someone. Someone who would do what no one else had ever done. Sit down beside him. It happened on a Monday, the kind of day that already felt off. Ben had missed the bus. He'd overslept, which wasn't like him. His alarm had gone off, but he must have turned it off without thinking. When he woke up, the sun was already too bright through his window. He rushed through his morning routine, grabbed a half-squished granola bar from his backpack, and got a ride from his dad, who didn't say much beyond, "You good?" Ben nodded. He always nodded. He slipped into third period just as the bell rang. The teacher looked up but didn't say anything. The only open seat was in the second row. Normally Ben chose the back. He liked it there. It was quiet, out of sight, safe. But today, there were no options. So he slid into the empty desk, pulled out his notebook, and kept his eyes down. It wasn't until a few minutes into class that he realized someone was sitting next to him. He didn't recognize him. Tall, brown hair, hoodie with the sleeves pushed up, scribbling something on his notebook with a pencil that looked half broken. He wasn't talking to anyone, just focused, like he was in his own world. Halfway through the class, the guy leaned over slightly and said, "Hey, what page are we on?" Ben blinked. It wasn't the question that surprised him. It was the fact that someone was asking him. He cleared his throat and answered quietly, Page 32. The guy smiled. Cool, thanks. That was it. Nothing dramatic, just a simple interaction. But it left a weird feeling behind. Not bad. Just different. When the bell rang, Ben packed up quickly like he always did. He usually waited until everyone else left, but the guy beside him stood at the same time. Later, man, he said casually, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. Ben didn't answer at first. Then, without thinking, he nodded. Just a little. It stuck with him all day. He kept playing it over in his mind. The tone of voice, the ease of it, like it was normal, like talking to Ben wasn't anything strange. The next day, Ben made it to class on time. That same seat was open again, and so was the one next to it. The guy was already there this time, flipping through his notebook. Ben sat down, keeping his head down again. But after a minute, the guy looked over. You were right, by the way, he said. That worksheet yesterday? I totally missed that first question. Had to guess. Ben gave a quiet half smile. I'm Tyler, by the way, he added, holding out a hand like it wasn't a big deal. Ben hesitated for a second, then shook it. Ben. Cool. You been in this class the whole year? Ben nodded. Man, I'm terrible with faces, but I'm glad I sat here. I hate that front corner over there. Always feels like the teacher's staring straight into your soul. Ben laughed. Just once, and quietly. But it was real. Tyler grinned. There it is. Knew you had a laugh in there. That day, Tyler didn't stop talking. Not in an annoying way, just little things. Jokes about the textbook, comments about the weather, a weird story about his dog eating a homework sheet when he was in middle school. Nothing big. But he said it like he didn't expect anything back. Like it was fine if Ben didn't respond. That made it easier. By the end of the week, Ben found himself waiting for class to start. Not because he liked the subject, but because Tyler was there. And for once, someone looked at him and actually saw him. Tyler didn't ask him about his grades or what clubs he was in. He didn't treat him like a project or a mystery. He just talked to him. Like they were equals. Like he belonged. Ben wasn't sure what to do with that, but he didn't pull away. He just kept showing up, and Tyler kept sitting beside him. No questions, no pressure. Just one seat that wasn't empty anymore. By the second week, Ben started to realize something strange was happening. Tyler didn't stop. He didn't drift away like most people did after one or two conversations. He didn't lose interest. He didn't suddenly go silent. Every class, Tyler showed up and sat in the same seat next to Ben, like it was just understood now. Like they had some sort of unspoken agreement. And he talked about everything. Music, movies, the weird stuff people said in the hallways, what he was eating for lunch. He even asked Ben what kind of snacks he liked. And when Ben shrugged and said he didn't really have a favorite, Tyler said, "That's a crime. We're fixing that." Ben didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. The next day, Tyler showed up with a bag of chips and tossed it on Ben's desk. "Try these," he said. "Top-tier snack. Elite status." Ben stared at the bag like it might explode. He looked at Tyler, who just grinned and said, "Come on, man. Live a little." So he opened them. And they were good. But more than that, the gesture caught him off guard. It wasn't a big deal to most people, but to Ben, it felt huge. Like someone had gone out of their way for him and didn't expect anything in return. That feeling stuck. Tyler didn't ask personal questions. He didn't pry. He didn't dig into Ben's life the way some people did, trying to figure him out. He just included him. Naturally. Casually. Like Ben had always been there. One afternoon, they were walking out of class when Tyler said, "You play games?" Ben glanced over. "Sometimes." What kind? RPGs mostly. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Okay. Didn't peg you for that, but respect. You play online? Ben hesitated. Sometimes. I usually play solo. Tyler nodded like he got it. Makes sense. But if you ever want to team up, let me know. I suck, but I'm entertaining. Ben actually smiled at that. Tyler noticed. There it is again, he said. You should use that more. You've got a good smile. Ben looked away quickly, but his ears went red. Tyler didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like a fact. Simple. Honest. That was the thing about him. He didn't overdo it. He wasn't loud or fake. He was just steady. Like a presence Ben hadn't realized he needed until it was right there beside him every day. One day, Ben forgot a pencil. He was halfway through his bag when Tyler reached over and handed him one without saying a word. It wasn't even a big moment. But Ben stared at that pencil for a few seconds longer than he needed to. People didn't usually notice when he forgot things, or when he was quiet, or when he was sitting alone. They definitely didn't fill the empty space without making a big deal out of it. But Tyler just did. A few days later, Tyler leaned over during a slow part of class and whispered, "You know you're pretty cool, right?" Ben blinked. "What?" "You," Tyler said. "You're cool. You just don't know it yet." Ben didn't know what to say to that. He'd never heard anyone say something like that to him. Not his classmates. Not even his teachers. Not in a way that felt real. Tyler went back to his notes like he hadn't just said something that stuck to the inside of Ben's chest. And that was the moment Ben realized something else. Tyler wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't going to treat Ben like a temporary project. He wasn't just being polite. He wasn't waiting for something in return. He just liked being around him. That kind of kindness, steady, quiet, consistent, was unfamiliar. But it was starting to break through the wall Ben had built around himself. Not all at once, just a little at a time. And sometimes, a little is all it takes. It was a Friday when it happened, just after class, when everyone was grabbing their stuff and heading for lunch. Tyler stood up, slung his backpack over one shoulder like he always did, then looked at Ben. "You got plans for lunch?" Ben froze for a second. No." "Cool," Tyler said. "Come sit with us." It wasn't said like an invitation. It was said like a given, like it made total sense. Ben hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because no one had ever asked before. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly, almost wishing he hadn't said it. Tyler gave him a confused look. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" Ben didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded. They walked down the hallway together. Ben tried not to overthink it, but every step felt a little heavier. His hands were in his pockets. His chest felt tight. His brain was already spinning with what-ifs. What if they didn't want him there? What if he sat down and no one said anything? What if he ruined the whole dynamic just by showing up? But when they got to the lunch table, it wasn't anything like that. Tyler's friends were already there, 3 of them. A girl with short hair and a sarcastic voice, a tall guy who talked with his hands, another guy with glasses who had a quiet laugh. They looked up when Tyler arrived, and he gestured casually at Ben. "This is Ben. He's cool. Be nice." Just like that. Like it was no big deal. One of them scooted over to make room. The girl raised an eyebrow and said, "You're the guy who drew that sketch in history class, right?" Ben nodded, surprised. "That was sick," she said. "I wish I could draw like that." Ben mumbled a thanks and sat down slowly. He didn't talk much that first lunch. He didn't know what to say or when to jump in. But the thing was, no one made him feel weird for being quiet. They didn't stare or try to pull him into every conversation. They just included him. The tall guy offered him some fries. The guy with glasses asked what games he liked. Tyler filled in the gaps, joking around and keeping the conversation moving like it was second nature. Ben sat there, quietly amazed. He wasn't a background extra anymore. He wasn't invisible. He was part of something. The next Monday, he showed up to lunch again, half expecting it to feel different, like maybe they'd just been nice that one time. But the same seat was open, and Tyler waved him over like it was already his. By the second week, Ben was laughing a little more. Not all the time, not loudly, but it came out. Someone told a dumb story about their math teacher falling asleep during a test, and Ben actually laughed hard enough to drop his fork. No one made fun of him for it. Tyler just grinned and said, "There he is." That's what stuck with Ben. It wasn't just that he was being included. It was that no one was surprised he belonged there. They acted like he always had. After school one day, Tyler caught up with him in the parking lot. "You know," he said, "you're not as quiet as you think you are." Ben gave a small smile. "I kind of am." Tyler shrugged. "Yeah, but not in a bad way. Some people talk too much and say nothing. You talk less and say stuff that actually matters." Ben didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded, and Tyler bumped his shoulder with a grin. "We're glad you're around, man." That sentence echoed in Ben's head all the way home. "We're glad you're around." He'd waited years to hear something like that. Now someone had said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. And for the first time, it almost felt true. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Little by little, the walls Ben had spent years building around himself started to loosen. They didn't crash down in one dramatic moment. There was no movie scene, no big emotional breakthrough. It was quieter than that. Slower, but just as real. It started with small choices. He stopped wearing his hoodie every day. It wasn't about fashion. It was about not needing to hide behind the same gray fabric anymore. He started wearing shirts with colors. Nothing flashy, just something different. Something that felt a little more like him. He started showing up to school a few minutes earlier. Not because he had to, but because Tyler was usually already there, leaning against the wall by their classroom, sipping some gas station coffee and making fun of how bad it tasted. Ben liked that part of the day. It felt solid, predictable in the best way. He still brought his lunch, but now he sat in the middle of the table instead of the edge. He still listened more than he talked. But when he did talk, people listened. One afternoon, Tyler invited him to join the school's gaming club. Ben didn't say yes right away. He froze for a second, old habits kicking in, waiting for it to be some kind of joke. But Tyler just raised an eyebrow and said, "Dude, you literally know more about RPGs than anyone I've ever met. You'd crush it." So Ben went. He walked in that first day with his shoulders tight and his voice low. But by the end of the hour, someone had asked his opinion on a story mod. Someone else complimented his character sketches, and the advisor told him they were looking for someone to help design a poster for the club. He said yes. That night, Ben opened his sketchbook for the first time in weeks and started drawing again. It felt good, like something had come back to life. At home, things felt different too, not because anything changed on the outside, but because he had. He started telling his parents a little more. When they asked how school was, he didn't just say fine. He told them about a funny thing Tyler said, or the game they were designing at club. He even showed his sister a comic strip he'd drawn. They noticed. They didn't say anything big, just small things. His mom smiled more when he talked, and his dad gave him a quiet nod after dinner that meant more than words. He still had bad days, moments where the old voice came back, telling him to shrink, to disappear. But now, There was something else in his head. Tyler's voice, his friend's laughter, the memory of someone saying, "We're glad you're around," and that voice was louder. One Thursday, his English teacher stopped him after class. "I've noticed something," she said. "You seem lighter lately, like something's changed." Ben didn't know how to explain it. How do you describe what it means to be seen after years of feeling invisible? So he just smiled and said, "Yeah, I think I've got good people around me now." She smiled back. "That makes all the difference." He walked out of that classroom and realized something else. Tyler didn't save him. He didn't swoop in and fix everything. He didn't make Ben into someone new. He just saw him. He sat beside him, talked to him, treated him like he mattered, consistently, without effort, without making it feel like charity. That's what changed Ben. Not some dramatic moment. Just a person who showed up and didn't walk away. The kind of person who reminded him of who he was before the silence. And slowly, Ben began to believe it too. Graduation came faster than Ben expected. He remembered standing in the gym, dressed in a gown that felt too big, surrounded by people hugging, crying, laughing. The noise was loud, the energy electric. He stood near the edge of it all, like he always had. But this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't alone. Tyler found him in the crowd, already tossing his cap up and catching it like it was just another Tuesday. "There you are," he said, clapping Ben on the back. "Didn't think you'd disappear on me now." Ben smiled. "Nah, I stuck around." "Yeah, you did." That summer, things slowed down. Everyone started talking about college, jobs, plans. Tyler was heading out of state. Ben was staying local, starting community college and working part-time at a bookstore. There was one night, in July, when they sat on the hood of Tyler's car outside a convenience store, drinking terrible bottled coffee and watching the streetlights buzz. Neither of them said much for a while. Then Tyler asked, "You ever think about how things might have gone if we never talked that day in class?" Ben looked down at the cup in his hands. "All the time," he said. Tyler nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too." Ben took a breath. He hadn't said this out loud before, not to anyone. "You were the first person who didn't treat me like I was invisible," he said quietly. Tyler didn't joke or smile. He just looked at him and said, "You never were." It hit Ben harder than he expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. He could feel it. He looked back on all the years where he sat alone, stayed quiet, hoped someone would notice. All the days where he felt like he didn't matter. And now, looking back, it wasn't that he had changed into someone else. He had always been this person. He just finally had the space to be it. Tyler gave him that space, not with big speeches or promises, but with presence. With the kind of steady friendship that didn't ask for anything, didn't try to fix anything. It just stayed. That kind of person doesn't come around often. But sometimes, once, if you're lucky, they do. Ben knew they were heading in different directions. Life was pulling them forward, the way it does after high school. But that didn't erase what had been built. A real friend doesn't vanish after graduation. They just carry a part of you with them. And you carry a part of them too. Now, years later, Ben still remembers that version of himself. The quiet boy who kept his head down, who hoped someone would say his name. He's not that boy anymore. He doesn't sit at the edge of the table. He speaks up when he has something to say. He laughs easier. He walks through the world like he belongs in it. Because he does. And it all started with one seat. One person. One moment where someone chose to sit down beside him and stay. Ben never forgot that. He never will. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.